on this particular day of this sculpture where I'm showing him standing here, he is back home to Arkansas City to show people what I've done. Look at my accomplishments. He has a magazine in his hand, and those people probably knew who he was back then. So he's back to tell them who he is now. But once he got there, he's thinking, I did all this in spite of where I grew up. But as he's looking on this particular day, and I keep saying that because it's a moment, he's saying to himself, this is not in spite of Arkansas City. I'm who I am because of Arkansas City. Because of Arkansas City, I had to learn to survive on a levee and a tent.
Arkansas, and Susan Holley Williams was tagged to create this sculpture with the Delta Heritage Trail.
Mm-hmm.
What does that feel like?
It feels good. It's unexpected, and it's something that I have taken a lot of pride in doing, and I'm excited about this opportunity.
What about this connection between you being from small town Arkansas and John H. Johnson being from small town Arkansas City, Arkansas?
It's just ironic, the fact that he was born in Arkansas City, which is DeShay County. This Delta Heritage Trail starts in Phillips County, which is where my husband was born, and it ends in DeShay County, which is where I was born and which is where Mr. Johnson was born. So it's just, to me, it's ironic that they would have connected me as a sculptor, African American as he is, and a female in that area.
Who is Susan Williams?
I have a degree in interior design, housing and interior design. Started school at University of Arkansas at Fayetteville. I was encouraged not to do art as my major because artists don't make any money. So I went to the route of interior design, but I never gave up on the art. I couldn't give up on the art. I just continued to create art and have a love and passion for art.
We're in your studio right now. We've got images, we've got tools, all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I see it here. This stuff is going away, but can you walk us through the process of going from this to what we see now?
Okay, so it's not going away because I'm going to continue this. But the way I started this particular project, this is the first time I've done one this large. I've done a life-size head, but never a full body. So this process started with a maquette, which is a half life-size piece, about 36 inches. And I create this piece. And this piece is created in clay, which is what I'm playing with right now.
Okay.
And once it's created, I send it to a foundry and they enlarge it with a 3D printer. And when it's enlarged, it's carved through the computer with out of styrofoam. And once that's done, I go in and do the tooling, meaning I add more clay to it and I tool the face, the head, the nose, everything all over again. So it's almost like I'm creating it twice.
So you told me that you probably started on redid his face. Because I think, I mean, when I look at it, I'm just thinking you just go in and because you are that artist, you go in and you already know what you're doing, what his hands will look like, what his eyes are gonna look like based on all the images.
Uh-huh.
How many times did you have to redo John H. Johnson?
I had to redo him probably 12 times, maybe, his face. The body was not as hard, but trying to get that image, and not just the image of how he looks, but an expression that I want to portray. A lot of people just take what they see. I took what made sense, because there were some pictures that didn't look the same, his profile as his age progressed and all that. So I had to find him between age 60 and 70 and assume that he had lost a little more fat here and just make up for those things. So I didn't just sculpt what I saw, I sculpted what I knew was probably happening with him. So there were a lot of decisions I had to make right here in this room. I mean, every little decision, I had pictures of his hands, of his ears, and I just wanted to make sure it looked like him when people that knew him saw him. And people saw him at different stages, just like you said. You saw him when he was like in his 80s.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
So, yeah, just.
But even you having to decide, like you say, his fingers, his nail bed, those are, like you said, you make dozens of decisions every single day. You're working on them.
Thousands. Because every time I take a piece of clay, which is what I am here, every time you take a piece of clay and you put it on that sculpture, it has changed somehow. And you have to make a decision where it goes, how you should shape it, and if it should go there. And if it does, tomorrow, do you need to take it away? So it's just a lot of decisions you make over and over and over, which is a challenge, but something that I enjoy doing. I mean, it's a challenge and it's fulfilling and it excites me. I love it. And people say, my husband would say, aren't you tired? I'm up at 3 a.m. He said, aren't you tired? I said, I am, but I've gotten somewhere.
Right.
So I feel real good about, the process.
What was the hardest part for you? I know you said it was the face, but what was it? The eyes? Was it the nose, lips? Which was the hardest part? Most difficult part?
His lips, his mouth. And not just his mouth, but the expression, because your mouth really shows your expression. So it was the mouth for me. That was the part that gave me the most work.
And when you finally got those lips right,
I kissed him. I really did. I was up working. I would work till 2 a.m. easily and get up at 4, whatever. But I remember working on him and finding those lips, and I felt like they were just like his. And the whole time I'm working, I'm like, where are you, Mr. Johnson? Where are you? And when I started seeing features come through, I'm like, yes. And I remember when I saw those lips, I was like, I was just so glad to see them. But I changed it again. Because once you do that, it's a 3-dimensional sculpture. The mouth might look right, but the profile might be different. So, and I have to keep referring. I have all these pictures here because I have to keep referring to the shots that I do have. And they're not, some of them are very grainy. So I had to kind of fill in the blank a lot of times.
A lot of long nights, early days in the studio. What was the turning point, or the point where while you were working on this sculpture, where you started talking to him, where you started saying, where are we going with this? How do you want me to do this? Because like you said, you didn't have a whole lot of images out there.
Well, I didn't talk to him like that. Basically, like I said earlier, I was in search of him. I was always searching for that look that I wanted, that expression that I wanted. So I was always looking for that. And I would get up in the morning and say, good morning, Mr. Johnson. So I would talk to him that way, but not just talking like, how's your day today?
That's creepy.
Yeah, I didn't get creepy like that. But I did look for him. And every time I would find him, which was a lot of times, I would create him and it would be 2 a.m. or 5 p.m. And I would put him down, come back the next day, and look nothing like I wanted it to look. So he was gone again. So I would just get snowblind. So I would have to come back. Sometimes I would put him down for a week and not touch it. I would go out of town, come back, and try it again. And it just took all of that. It took all of me.
You hear from so many businessmen, Black businessmen, who say, whether they're not, of course, publishers, but in just a businessman in Chicago or across the nation. And they talk about the inspiration that John Johnson leaves behind. Why was it so important for you as an artist, Susan, to put in his name Ebony magazine?
Well, when I think of John Johnson, I think of Ebony magazine. I've read his book, Succeeding Against the Odds. So I know a little more about him than most people probably would know about him. I learned a lot about him through reading the book. But prior to that, and I'm thinking about the average person, my age, maybe a little younger, a little older, they think of John Johnson as Ebony or Jet magazine. Although folks that may be older than me think of him as Negro Digest, because that was his first magazine.
And tell us about, there's a secret to this sculpture that honors First Lady of Ebony and Jet magazine, Eunice, who of course Mr. Johnson always talked about. I mean, she had Ebony fashion fair. He would not have been the businessman that he was without her on her side. Tell us about that secret touch, family touch.
So what I thought was, when I'm creating Mr. Johnson and talked to his daughter, Linda, and I knew, even reading the book, I knew how important they were to him. I knew that Eunice came up with the name Ebony. And Linda basically took over while he was still there. And so I wanted to make sure that they were standing there with him. So in his head, I had my textures for his hair. I created their initials. So you won't see it unless you're looking for it. But on one side is L.J. Rice, Linda Johnson Rice. On the other side is E.W.J., which is Eunice Walker Johnson. So they're there right there with him.
That is amazing. So many of us, so many people out walking the Delta Trail will see this statue and just celebrate Black excellence. But you say there's a whole story behind this.
About him? Yes.
About your piece that you created?
Yeah. So what I see is, I know that Mr. Johnson grew up he was born in 1918. And he grew up during the flood, the biggest flood that ever happened in the U.S. And it was 1927, the flood of the Mississippi River. He was born on the river, on the levee. His city, Arkansas City, was on the levee. So where the levee broke there, basically everyone was just flooded out. They ended up living in government tents. His mother, he had a widowed mother he lost his father to an accident of some sort. But he grew up in that tent, and he had to survive as like a 9-10-year-old. So the story that I created behind this is that Mr. Johnson, on this particular day of this sculpture where I'm showing him standing here, he is back home to Arkansas City to show people what I've done. Look at my accomplishments. He has a magazine in his hand, and those people probably knew who he was back then. So he's back to tell them who he is now. But once he got there, he's thinking, I did all this in spite of where I grew up. But as he's looking on this particular day, and I keep saying that because it's a moment, he's saying to himself, this is not in spite of Arkansas City. I'm who I am because of Arkansas City. Because of Arkansas City, I had to learn to survive on a levee in a tent with my mother. I had to endure horrific things during that time. This was right before the Great Depression, 1927. It started in 29. So he lived there for a few years, actually years, on that levee with his mother, washing, cleaning, cooking, all the things you wouldn't think a child would do. So he's looking at this place and thinking, this is where I got my grit. This is how I'm Mr. Johnson today. Had it not been for Arkansas City, he would not have gone to Chicago. He moved there in 1933, 34. He would not have gone to Chicago hungry, but prepared, because Arkansas City prepared him for Chicago. But when he got there, he saw some things that he didn't see a lot of, an abundance of Black people, African-American people, successful, accomplished. And that excited him to the degree that he wanted to do magazines about these people. So he wanted to bring that out because it was something new for him. But had it not been for where he'd grown up, would have never been that interested.
And it goes back to what we were discussing yesterday about how Ebony Jet, that was in every Black household across the nation. It was right there on the coffee table. And you had from January to June, and if a month was missing, your mother, somebody was mad.
Oh, yeah.
But so let's talk about what that meant for you growing up. Because like you say, he put images in our head, and because I grew up in a small town as well.
Nice.
He made us see allowed us to see Black excellence.
Yes.
All over the country.
Yes. And not just excellence, but just stories, heartfelt stories of horrible stories. He did the Emmett Till story. So things that we would not have known about. It wasn't just for Black people. It was for everyone. I mean, America didn't know what Black people did on a daily basis, weekly basis, what they did and what they celebrated. He brought that out, so he exposed us to that. But as you were saying, the magazine was on every coffee table. It never ended up on our coffee table because we fought over it. I had 4 sisters, 1 brother. We fought over that magazine. It was in Eunice's room, Shula's room, Pat's room. I mean, our rooms were together because we grew up in a small town, but it was always somewhere else. You could never find that magazine. You always, where's the Ebony magazine? Where's the Jet magazine? We're always looking for it. And we would read those stories over and over and over. That's the only thing we had to what was going on in the life of Black American people was Ebony and Jet magazine. We had Life, we had Look, all those things, but it wasn't talking about us.
What do you want people out walking the Delta Heritage Trail to walk away? I mean, to think about or what do you want their takeaway to be after seeing this sculpture?
I think before they see the sculpture, I want them to be excited about seeing the sculpture. I want them to, if you're on the trail, chances are you know what's along the trail is coming. I want them to know that at the end of this trail, which is where where Arkansas City is, which is where the levee broke, flood of 1927, which he was a part of that. I want people to know that this is a small community, and from this community came someone like a John H. Johnson. It doesn't matter if you're from a small community, grew up in Chicago or wherever. He just happened to grow up in Arkansas City, Arkansas, which has probably never been more than 400 people. So it's a tiny community. So I want people to look at that, especially young folks, and say, if he came out of this, surely I can do something at least like this, or I can do better than that, you know? So I want that to be an encouragement for young folks to see.